did help. I mean, it was,
Yeah, Charlton has to.
But still, now I gotta watch it though.
1974, I don't know. He died young, didn't he?
Oh, Steve?
That was your dad.
Yeah, he can.
My dad was
And he
talking,
went to Mexico for
my
treatment
dad was talking to
because
him.
they had the like up and coming
Yeah,
fixes
Steve
for
McQueen.
that, and he passed away anyway.
He drank the water. Did he drink the water?
Yeah.
Yeah, he drank the water.
But he, interestingly enough, my great grandfather, not related, also went to Mexico for cancer treatment in '76 because it was less expensive. He passed. And then my father, when he was in the Marine Corps, was stationed in Mexico. They went out and partied one night and woke up super thirsty, and they told him, don't drink the water. Well, he drank the water, he got hepatitis, and he had to spend 2 months in the hospital.
Wow.
Yeah. I know. If somebody tells me don't drink the water, I'm going to drink the water longer.
Yeah, not Mexico.
She said that I'm not comfortable on
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not longer.
50, I don't know.
Good morning.
Dude. Not sure yet. You know what?
That's cool.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Cool. Just hope this grade you got, you know.
That's cool.
Yeah, but it felt weird because I was the education in that.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
It was weird. It was weird. I just, like, he had no social media connection to other people who weren't here. And my son was asking Ron about it, about his kid. And I was like, well, they're adults now. It's fine to be emotional because it's just making me turn down and shut out and make me hide.
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's your Bible.
One of the old one. That's the old one. This one's the one with all the
you
notes.
can ask where you found it,
No, this isn't the one. This is the old one. Why it was in her car though, I don't know.
All right. Good morning.
Morning.
Is it?
Yes,
Kind
it's
of.
absolutely the most wonderful morning ever.
We're here.
It is my anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary, Mom and Dad. So do I get the house tonight all to myself? Happy anniversary.
Cute.
No,
Oh,
I'll be in the hot tub recovering from framing.
oh, okay, I was just teasing.
Good idea.
Is there a volunteer to open us up in prayer this morning? Rebecca?
Oh, dear Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, that we could be gathered here today. Thank you that I could be in town visiting and be able to come visit the church that I love so much. Help us to get as much as we can from your word and bless these people that I love so much. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I'm just wondering if she loves us.
I keep saying it out loud, maybe it'll kick in.
Maybe it'll be true, right?
No, we didn't meet last week. No, we didn't, we haven't met yet. I'm visiting in town.
This is Rebecca. So sweet.
As I was getting ready to study yesterday, I started cleaning out the office, and I have all my fishing poles in the corner, so I was moving them.
Real dusty, right?
Yeah. And
Poor things.
the drywall tape in the corner was all bubbled out. So I touched it, and it was damp, and I was like, oh.
Is that
So-
your roof project on?
So I climbed up to the attic, through all the insulation, and had Sarah drill a hole through the ceiling so I could see where it was coming through. And she poked a rod up there, so I had to like worm my way on my belly,
Yeah.
like,
Through
truss
insulation.
trusses here, because you can't put your weight on the drywall, sheetrock. So I touched underneath, and yeah, it was the plywood or plywood boarding underneath the shingles was wet. So like we have a gable on the back side of the house, so where it meets. So I was like, oh. So I had to run and got some sheet metal and some tar, and hopefully that'll keep it dry for now through the winter until I get it. But that's a big heartache. Yeah, it was hard to focus though. I was dreading because we're already tight, and
You mean right
that,
now?
huh?
Like now?
Yeah. This was last night.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the front porch thing.
No, that thing's zipped up tight. It's not leaking.
So this isn't an area you roofed already?
No, this is because I knew we had to reshingle our house because I was up there last year cleaning it, and there's shingles that barely have any sand left on them. So I'm like, this is not good. So I'm either gonna have to reshingle it myself, which I'm dreading.
Shingle party. Shingle party.
I dread that though, because then my shingle lines are gonna look like this.
Fine, do it yourself.
I actually just saw something on Facebook the other day. The guy took pictures like, hey, that was my shingle job. It was all like that.
Look, man, as long as you don't have a CB do it, it'll be straight.
Facts.
You're laughing.
All right.
Can't tell you how many green wires I've been shocked off of. Stupid CB electricians.
All right.
Thank you, Laura.
They're the greatest dirt sailors ever.
No, they do other stuff.
Complain.
We complain a lot. Guys from my office.
All right. I'm gonna open up with Deuteronomy 7. Deuteronomy 7, chapter 1. Verse 1 through 4. Adonai your God is going to bring you into the land you will enter in order to take possession of it, and he will expel many nations ahead of you: the Hittite, the Girgashi, the Emori, the Canaanite, the Pizrai, the Hivi, and Yevusi. 7 nations bigger and stronger than you. When he does this, when Adonai your God hands them over ahead of you, and you defeat them, you are to destroy them completely. Do not make any covenant with them. Show them no mercy. Don't intermarry with them. Don't give your daughter to his son, and don't take his daughter for your son. For he will turn your children away from following me in order to serve other gods. If this happens, the anger of Adonai will flare up against you, and he will quickly destroy you. So, want to keep that in the back of our mind, because that will be relevant here. All right. Clicker. Forget. I don't have anybody running the computer. All right, what is, just a quick quiz, what does caliphate mean?
Caliphate, like the high priest for Islam?
Successor.
Yeah, the successor. Successor to who? Who's he succeeding? Right.
Mixed people into like a single religion, made them turn into a single religion, I guess.
Tried. Yep.
Or at least
He worked towards that, yes. Okay. What does Islam mean? No.
That's Arab.
Submission. Submission to Allah. Okay. All right.
Submission or submission to Allah?
Well, it just means submission. Submitter. All right, so what I wanted to do a quick recap just to show the progression, what the progression of the caliph looks like so far. So under the Rashidun dynasty, which is the first caliph, which is also called the rightly guided caliph. So the mission of the caliph during this time period was to continue the mission of Muhammad and to spread Islam to all Arabs. So their focus primarily was on just Arabs, to bring them into Islam or the teachings of Muhammad. It was also to purge Persia from the lands of Saudi Arabia. So if you remember, Persia had a lot of dealings in this region as well as down around the Yemen area. And where was the caliph centralized during this period? Where was their capital, where the government established office? Medina. Yep. So Medina, and then Mecca was still like the religious capital. So they would still go to the Kaaba for their Hajj or their pilgrimage. So you had Mecca and Medina. As far as division that existed among the Arabs, it was primarily between the royal clans of the Quraysh tribe. So the Quraysh tribe was the tribe of Muhammad, or what you could call the royal tribe. And they were based out of Mecca. And then if you remember, Muhammad, sensing their desire to assassinate him because their prophet was based off of paganism in the Kaaba, Muhammad sensed that they were going to off him, so he took off and went to Medina. Then the question is, during this time period, what was an Arab? So initially, the true Arab was considered to be a Bedouin. So the Bedouins were the people that lived in primarily the central part of Saudi Arabia. So they were more of the warrior, kind of wild people. If you remember, the Quraysh tribe sent Muhammad to the Bedouin tribe as a child to learn their ways, customs, their dialect. So they spoke the High Arabic, which became the ruling language of the Arabs. And so a true Arab was a Bedouin, or as well as any tribes associated with the Bedouins. So the Quraysh tribe was highly regarded by the Bedouins because they provided trade with the northern area. And then as far as popularity or influence at this time, Islam itself did not have significant influence over surrounding regions because they were centrally focused during this time, during the Rashidun Caliph. Okay, so that's the Rashidun Caliphate. And that was their region of rulership, primarily the peninsula. It's kind of hard to see, but that's Africa, Ethiopia. All right, then next is the Umayyad Caliph. So if you remember, the Umayyad clan is also of the Quraysh tribe, and they were probably the last clan within the Quraysh tribe to oppose Muhammad's teachings. So they weren't, by nature, they weren't oriented on spreading Islam or spreading Muhammad's teachings. So the caliph during the Umayyad dynasty's primary goal was expansion and not cohesion. It was less a concern about the teachings of Muhammad and more concerned about expanding their region of influence. Anybody remember where they moved the capital? Damascus, correct. So the focus on Medina and Mecca kind of weaned, although they still would travel to Mecca for their Hajj initially. How about division amongst the people? So if you remember, there was the people called the Kharijis. They were, so when Ali, who was a caliph for the Rashidun caliphate or dynasty, and Muawiyah, who was of the Umayyad clan, was set up as governor in Syria. They went to war with one another, and there was a section of people or sect that desired for Ali to establish a peace treaty with Muawiyah out of Syria. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I apologize, because I've not been in here for the last couple of months. I've been teaching little kids. What time frame are we talking? So.
Yeah, so this would be, it's a good question.
So the first 4 were 30 years.
So,
And the 5th was 20.
yeah, so this was around 650, late 650s, 650 AD. So the Umayyad Caliphate started in 661. So 650, late 650s.
So it seemed like more of a political expansion than a religious expansion.
Correct, yep.
Okay.
So the Kharijis wanted Ali to establish a peace treaty. He wanted him to end this battle with Muawiyah, but Ali refused to, which is partly why he was assassinated. And so the Kharijis, actually the Kharijis were, I think, believe the ones that assassinated Ali. So, so under the Umayyad Caliphate, once Muawiyah took office as the caliph, so that's why the capital was moved from Medina to Damascus, and also Muawiyah was influenced by the Syrians. So upon Muawiyah's death, the office of caliph was sought out by the Shia, which the Kharijis were considered the Shia. So you've heard of Sunni and Shia. And this individual called Al-Kufa. So he decided to try and nip the Umayyad dynasty in the bud and start his own caliph back in Mecca. So then he was defeated. So the Shia, the Kharijis, invited Al-Hussein, who is one of Ali's 2 sons. So Ali was directly related to Muhammad. So Al-Hussein was related to Muhammad by one of Muhammad's daughters. So he was a son of one of Muhammad's daughters. So he was invited to go to Medina, where he led a rising up against Damascus. But they were wiped out by the Umayyad's governor in Iraq. So the Umayyad, that was another thing that Muawiyah had accomplished, was setting up centralized governments in like Iran, Iraq, parts of Afghanistan, northern Africa. And so upon this Al-Hussein's defeat, the Shia view his death as a glorious death. So that gave the Shia their greatest and most endearing propaganda. So currently, when boys are blown up to bits in present wars, it is a reenactment of that sacrifice. And in fact, some of the incitals that they do is in reference to al-Hussein's martyrdom when he went up against the Umayyad Caliphate. So there's a revolt out of Mecca and Medina against the Caliph. So in Mecca, al-Zubair, a grandson of the first Caliph Abu Bakr, set himself up as a rival caliph in 683. So this is the year that Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, died. And so he set himself up as a caliph in Mecca and managed to take control of a good majority of the empire, including much of Iraq, and held his position from 683 to 692. So this motivation of al-Zubair to set himself up as caliph may have been in response to the destruction of the Kaaba. So when al-Hussein revolted against Damascus, Yazid led a army against Mecca and destroyed the Kaaba. And so they rebuilt it, but this was one of the primary motivators for al-Zubair to go up against Damascus again.
He's Shia.
What's that?
He's Shia.
He's Shia, yep. So yeah. And the Shia are really Ali sympathizers. So they again draw the legitimate caliph back to Muhammad through lineage and election. So then enter the Caliph Abd al-Malik. Some you guys who were here last weekend should remember him. He was the one that built the mosque in Jerusalem. So Abd al-Malik forbade pilgrimage to Mecca and declared Jerusalem the substitute destination. And that's what led to the Dome of the Rock. So he had the Dome of the Rock built, and it was completed in 691.
Wow, that's fast.
Abd al-Malik led a final assault against Mecca in 692. So he killed al-Zubair and destroyed the recently rebuilt Kaaba. So the Kaaba is again destroyed. Abd al-Malik had al-Zubair's head brought to Damascus to be put on display. They were big fans of cutting off heads. In the book I'm reading, there's heads being passed around all the time.
It's not funny, man. Just ask Marie Antoinette.
Yeah. So after the destruction of the Kaaba, the peninsula would not play a part in politics again until 1,300 years later, upon the discovery of oil. I said the peninsula, Saudi Arabia, would not play a part in politics until the discovery of oil, 1,300 years later. So you have the Rashidun Caliph, where Arabs are the focus. It's centralized out of Saudi Arabia. Muawiyah takes office. Focus moves up to the Syrian area, and the significance of Saudi Arabia is diminished. So they enter this guy, this is a portrayal of him with one of his many heads on display after cutting it off.
That's not a complimentary.
No, to him it would be. So that is one of Al-Maduk's Rottweilers. It was his attack dog. That's what they called him, attack dog. His name was Al-Hajjaj. No, he wasn't a hitman. He was like, bring it to you directly. So the Kharijists, the people I mentioned before, who are Shia, they again revolted against Abd al-Malik in Iraq. So al-Malik released his Rottweiler, al-Hajjaj, who was a viceroy who was notorious for his harshness. History notes that he refused to suck his mother's milk and that of his wet nurse, and instead was given the blood, or made to lick the blood of 2 black lambs, a black kid, and a black snake. Which I don't. You can. Now it was common practice. It was common practice if a child would not latch that they would give it blood of sheep, but to who knows if the snake is included, but it is said that from thereafter he could never resist bloodshed. So kind of romanticized.
We call that a psychopath.
So I wanted to read one of his speeches. So he gave a speech from one of the mosque pulpit in a mosque. Actually, also I want to bring up that in his mission, he killed, it's estimated 120,000 carriages, that doesn't include 50,000 men and 30,000 women who were in his way. All right, so he gave a sermon. He says, "I am the son of brightness, climber of the folded mountain passes. When I unveil myself, you will know me." Thus he was revealed as Lucifer, dark bringer of light. He continued, "I come bearing evil for evil, weight for weight. I measure the sandals of evil by their footprints. I reward evil with evil, and I see heads ripe for the picking, heads that are mine to pluck. I see blood oozing between turbans and beards." So this is a sermon that he gave from a mosque. Very, very evil. Yeah. This al-Hajjaj was also cited as the role model for Saddam Hussein. Yep. So he was the hero of Saddam Hussein. All right, so the caliph was driven by expansion, not cohesion. It was not focused on Muhammad and spreading and continuing as a legitimate successor in terms of spreading Islam, Muhammad's teachings. Division amongst the people. So there was a region, the Khorasan region, which I've kind of outlined here. The border of Iran. It's the northwestern part of Iran. So they call them the Khorasans. They were unwilling to hand over their spoils that they piled up in conquest. So a lot of these nations that were controlled by Damascus, by the caliph, as they expanded their territory under Islam, they were required to send a portion of their booty back to Damascus. So the Khorasans refused to do that. The region was hemmed by river, desert, and mountains. So any independent-minded leader there could rule the land virtually on his own as his own nation. So they were very well isolated. So an individual named Qutayba did just that. He was a man from the peninsula, and he imported many men from the Persian Gulf region. And Qutayba went up against Abd al-Malik in 715, but he was defeated and killed. So they began revolting against Damascus. So subsequent governors rose after continuing the revolt against the Umayyads. They added to their ranks un-Islamized Persians. So remember, Persia, this region here was Persia at a point before they were defeated by the Umayyad Caliph. So the the Khurasans added un-Islamicized Persians, peasants and nobles, and Persianized Arabs to their ranks. And they also added Arabs from Iraq. So Arabs from Western Iraq also joined the ranks. And then this is just an image of that region here. So you can see how, the extreme some of the mountain ranges are. And the Khurasans this little nation, the Khurasans, eventually wiped out the Umayyad rule in Persia, as well as in Iraq. And they donned black banners as their revolutionary flag. So if you've ever seen some of the flags that Muslims display, it's a black flag with Arabic writing on it, and that's the banner of the Khurasans. So the Khurasans wiped out the Umayyad rule in Persia, Iraq, and they would come to produce the first Abbasid Caliphate, who was Abu Abbas, Abdallah. So this is where the Khurasans are where the next Caliphate dynasty comes from. So it went from Mecca north to Damascus, and then we're going to see it transfer over this area. I'll get there. Yeah, so this is where the Khurasans are from. So what was an Arab at this time? This is towards the end of Umayyad dynasty. So with the focus being less on Mecca and Medina, but on the expansion and the horizon, the true Arab were all Arabians. So there was no longer a distinction. So you remember during Muhammad's time in the Rashidun Caliph, they claimed the true Arab was a Bedouin. And then they had the Hadar, which were more the southern tribes and the northern tribes. So they were the more cultured tribes. But they spoke a different dialect and Low Arabic. So there was a distinction of what an Arab was between inner tribes. So that changed during the Umayyad Caliph. So all Arabs, regardless if they were of the southern tribes or northern tribes or of the Bedouin, they were both considered Arabs. Any person that drew their lineage to Ishmael was considered an Arab. Any division within Arabs was derived less from what clan or tribe they were from, but what they had to do with the expansion effort and their wealth. It was more to do with whether or not they were nationalists. What is a nationalist, or what is nationalism? It's someone who supports their nation, right? How much support they offer it. So it's kind of, if you were to draw a comparison, it's similar to the current Scottish nationalists, where the line to true Scot is not what side of the Hadrian Wall you are on, but more to do with the Scots stance on taxation, oil revenue, and the European Union. So it's no longer a line drawn based on your bloodline or what part of the region you live in. And then as far as influence, you can see popularity, influence, you can see, and we covered this, how far the Umayyad Caliph had spread. So up into Spain, it's not shown here, but they tried to take over Constantinople. They had a significant influence along the coast of the Mediterranean, all along the coast, all of northern Africa. So huge expansion during the Umayyad Caliph. David?
I might need to do a little more research, but there is between the three first presidents, or at least between the
Caliphs.
No, the first presidents, our presidents, there was a petition to create a navy to get to not have any pirates.
That's true. That's in the Constitution too, if I'm correct.
It's not. It's in the Navy's thing.
Yeah. What are you?
No, there was a piece of paper that established at least the corner, the topmost part of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I forget which nation it was, but they acknowledged America as their own nation. But the other side, the rest of the Caliph, didn't.
So you're talking later in history?
Yeah, later
okay.
on in history.
Okay.
This is going to come up between our first president.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't remember any of that being in history, actually.
Yeah, because it's been covered up by so many different other things.
Okay. So, talked about the Khorasan, and that's where the next dynasty comes from. So the Abbasid dynasty, 750 to 1517, 37 caliphs. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about every single caliph like I did with the other dynasties, but I will talk about the caliphs and their mission. Their mission was to, their mission, as we'll get into, I got 5 minutes, was focused on knowledge and the spread of Arab culture and religion. So the Abbasids made a new start from the Umayyad dynasty. They began systematically erasing the Umayyad leaders by disinterring or digging up their graves and desecrating their remains. So they do it by burning them, beating them, and hanging them up in crucifixion. The first caliph, Al-Sufa, moved to the central governing city from Damascus to Al-Kufa, and then to Al-Anbar. And then when Al-Sufa died in 754, his brother Abu Jafar became caliph and moved the capital to Baghdad, where it's called the Round City. So he had a mosque built, or not the mosque, the Caliph Palace built at the center, and then all the merchant industrial buildings were built around it in a circle. Baghdad quickly became the new hub of multiple silk and spice roads, even so much so that eventually the trade networks were established where they could deliver plum-like fruit 2,500 kilometers, which is 1,500 miles, and arrive fresh at its destination. This is in 770 AD. Yeah. This caliph would come to have the largest influence in the world. So even though their territory was reduced, so if you look, they, in fact, I think we briefly discussed this last weekend, there was, the Umayyad caliph kind of split off and there was a caliph established in Spain. So the Abbasid Caliphate didn't focus on Spain. They reduced their territory in Africa, but they still, their primary focus was in this region, as well as Egypt, as we'll get into during the fall of the Abbasid. So they would have the largest influence in the world. Unlike the Umayyad dynasty, where the base of the which was kind of structured where the base of an imperial pyramid had become even more plural, so through their expansion of territory. At the same time, the apex, the leader, had risen until it had lost touch with the ground. So during the Umayyad dynasty, the leaders became so disconnected from the people, from the regions that they had a hard time ruling, given all the revolutions against them. The Abbasid Caliphate sought to relate to and learn the societies it ruled over. So that was part of one of the reasons for their success. And I'm out of time, so I'll stop there. Okay. Any comments or questions so far? So just a quick recap. So you have Islam focused during the Rashidun Caliph in Arabia. During the Umayyad Caliph, it's decentralized and moved up to Damascus, where their territories expanded exponentially. We talked about that. It's probably the only nation in history to expand that much in such a short period of time. And their focus was not on spreading Muhammad's message, but on gaining territory. And then you have the Abbasid, which their mission was to gain knowledge and spread Islam. Okay? All right, thanks. I wanted to get to Daniel 2 as well, talk about the iron leg, but in the feet of clay and iron, but we'll talk about that next.
Teaser.
Yeah.
Just a teaser.
All right. Break.
Is that done? Ready, break.